Welcome back again to Last Week I Watched. I'm Mark and I watch and review movies and TV shows and then give you my thoughts on whether or not they're worth your time. So this week I want to talk about Happy Death Day, The Witch, Prey, Split, Day Shift and Malignant. So let's talk about them. First up is Happy Death Day. It's a movie from 2017. It's starring Jessica Rothe, Israel Broussard and Ruby Modine, and this was showing on Prime. So this is about mean girl Tree Gelbman, played by Roth. She must relive the day of her murder over and over again until she's able to discover her killer's identity. Waking up after a night of drunken partying in Carter's, played by Broussard's dorm room, she goes about her day only to be murdered later in the evening by a figure wearing a mask of the high school mascot. Basically, it's a mashup of Groundhog Day and Scream with a slight touch of Mean Girls thrown in. Tree replays the same day over and over, trying to discover the identity of the masked killer. Unfortunately, as she changes things, she dies in different ways as the killer still seems to catch up with her no matter what she does. It's a clever idea, and while time loops have been done before, it's very slickly handled in this film. The real horror, I think, is being trapped in the same day with the same mundanities over and over again, and having to do the same things over and over, as well as bringing any help up to speeding in daily, I think would drive anyone a bit crazy. The film might be classed as a horror, but it's not particularly scary. A lot of the murdering happens off screen and you're shown the outcome, not necessarily the gory details of it. It's probably more of a comedy thriller, I think, in tone. It's an interesting detail that Tree remembers the days and is starting to feel the effects of the deaths as the loops repeat. It's more of a thriller, I think, with some comedic elements. The cast do a good job, and Roth has a chance to show different facets of her character as the story progresses. The story throws in a few red herrings into the mix too, to sort of hide the killer, and I found the suggested killer a bit confusing initially because it seemed a bit out of left field. It does make sense in the end why that person could have been under suspicion, but at the time it didn't immediately make sense, and it was very much why the hell is this person suddenly in serious contention for the killer role. Overall though, I think it was a good film. I had a good time with it and I recommend checking it out. There's a sequel called Happy Death Day 2, which I plan to check out, which continues the story, and the director says is influenced by Back to the Future 2, which is intriguing. I'll review it when I've seen it. Next up is The Witch. It's from 2015, starring Anna Taylor-Joy, Ralph Ineson and Kate Dickie. It was showing on Prime. So this one's about a family in 1630s New England, and they're torn apart by the forces of witchcraft, black magic, and I guess demonic possession. This is from Robert Eggers, the director who wrote and directed The Lighthouse and The Northman. The Witch bills itself as a New England folk tale, not a fairy tale, so it tries to place itself in reality. It's very much, I think, a period drama with some horror elements and a very strong sort of feminist narrative. Thomasin, played by Taylor-Joy, and her family, they're banished from their Puritan colony over a religious dispute. The family make a new home near a large and secluded forest, and then when things start to go wrong, the family sort of slowly disintegrates, and Thomasin must make a choice. The film is very atmospheric with period accurate settings and costumes. It's naturally lit, and the director wanted it to use natural lighting to the point that interior scenes are only lit with candles. The film is visually stunning. The production team worked extensively with British and American museums to ensure that the period was as authentic as possible, but the story is slow moving. It takes time to build a sense of unease and tension. The central theme seems to be a conflict between the repressive Puritan society and the dark liberation of the witches, which lures Thomasin as she transitions to adulthood and choosing her own path into adulthood. Thomasin has yearnings for independence, sexuality, acceptance and freedom, and when her religious family fail to support that, she is tempted by Satan with earthly satisfaction. Ironically, she trades her Puritan religion for an alternate form of religion, turning to murder in exchange for freedom. It's an interesting film. It's atmospheric. It has a lot of symbolism. I think it provokes some thought and discussion, much more of a thinking person's horror. I would recommend checking it out, and the director's later film, The Lighthouse, is also excellent. I'll definitely have to check out The Northman next. Next up is Prey. It's from 2022, starring Amber Midthunder, Dakota Beavers, and Diane DeLiegro, and it's showing on Disney+. So in the world of the Comanche Nation 300 years ago, Naru, played by Midthunder, is a skilled warrior. She fights to protect her tribe against a predator from another world. Predator from 1987 with Schwarzenegger is a great action film with some genuine moments of terror as they're stalked by something invisible and way better equipped than they are. It's only through using the environment and outsmarting the predator that Dutch is ultimately able to prevail. And the subsequent sequels tried to build on the Yautja mythology and introduce some interesting elements, but never quite gelled. The Alien vs Predator films contradicted established elements to force the creatures together, largely based on an Easter egg in the second Predator film, which was an alien skull mounted on the Predator's trophy wall. Predator returned with some much more direct sequels, but The Predator from 2018 marked a low point in the franchise and was pretty well discarded for its poor story. Predator seeking autism as an evolutionary advantage. Prey marks something of a reboot for the franchise, and thankfully it's fantastic. It's much more of a return to the roots of the story, and the 1600s setting is really rich and interesting with the Comanche people. I also enjoyed that it touched on the other predators of the time, the immigrants who came and started consuming the resources of the so-called New World. It was particularly sad when Naru stumbles upon the plain of butchered buffalo, killed not for their meat but just for their skins, an act that will over time threaten the natives who took only what they needed and nearly drove the buffaloes to extinction. It also lends itself well to some beautiful landscape cinematography. The film's beautifully shot and there are plenty of shots of stunning scenery. There's even an indigenous language version where you can watch the entire film in the Comanche language with subtitles, which is super cool. The cast do a great job. It's fantastic to see an authentically Native American cast in the film. The action's really good too. It takes time to build suspense, and the heroine isn't overpowered, but learns from her encounters with the predator and her experience hunting in the wild. And she uses her knowledge to outsmart the predator. The predator looks like it's had a bit of a redesign also, which isn't uncommon across the series. And while the armor and weapons are not as advanced as we've seen in some of the other films, given it's set 300 years earlier, it's the changes to the appearance of the predator that really stand out. The alien's much leaner looking and more feral looking. The face is different looking with much larger mandibles, and it's a lot more animalistic. I doubt the species would have made drastic evolutionary changes in 300 years, unless it's sort of hinting at the genetic engineering storyline of the predator. But I suppose it's entirely possible it's also another ethnicity of the same species. At any rate, it's genuinely scary and threatening looking, and I really like the redesign. Overall, I wasn't expecting a lot given how poor the last film was, so I was overjoyed that this film was so good. Hopefully it'll rejuvenate the franchise and we can expect some more great period stories. Perhaps something explaining how the musket eventually ends up in the Predator's claws for Predator 2. Definitely check this out if you're into the series. Next up is Split. It's from 2016, starring James McAvoy, Anna Taylor-Joy, and Betty Buckley. It was showing on Prime. So, 3 girls are kidnapped by a man with 23 distinct personalities. They must try to escape before the emergence of a terrifying 24th. This is the middle child in M. Night Shyamalan's stealth superhero trilogy, Unbreakable, followed up by Glass. Combining the characters from this and Unbreakable, it's kind of a secret sequel in that Bruce Willis's David Dunn makes a small cameo at the end of the film. The film focuses more on Kevin Wendell Crumb, played by McAvoy, and is basically a villain origin story. As he suffers from dissociative identity disorder, he has 23 different personalities, some of which are acting out by abducting the 3 young women for sacrifice to the 24th personality, who is coming to cleanse the unclean, the Beast. This personality has superhuman abilities and is cannibalistic. Dr. Fletcher, played by Buckley, tries to help Kevin when she comes to realize that one of the other personalities has taken over and Kevin is no longer in control. And as I mentioned, there is a brief appearance by Bruce Willis reprising his David Dunn character from Unbreakable, and this establishes that Dunn and Crumb exist in the same universe, potentially with Mr. Glass also. McAvoy gives an impressive performance with Crumb and the multiple personalities, although he cycles through a handful of them and not all 24 across the course of the film, but they're different enough in their behaviours and voices to give the actor something challenging to perform. The one actor that always seems to let down Shyamalan, though, is Shyamalan himself. He has a bit part sort of cameo, and they always feel awkward and out of place in his films. I don't think he's a very good actor, and I think he perhaps should stay behind the camera. Just gently suggesting. He does do a good job though with a super villain origin story, which I think was the first at the time to really do a full origin of a super villain solely in his own film. And this allows him to continue building on his superhero mythos as well. The film did receive some criticism from the mental health community for its depiction of dissociative identity disorder. People affected by the disorder are very rarely a problem to the community at large, so there was concern that the film demonises the sufferers of this condition. It's a good film, and if you enjoyed Unbreakable, you should definitely check it out to continue the story. I'll be looking to watch Glass next, the third film in the series, and it sounds like it brings the three characters together in a conclusion. Next up is Day Shift. It's from 2022, starring Jamie Foxx, Dave Franco, Carla Souza. It's showing on Netflix. So this one's about hardworking Bud Jablonski, played by Fox. He's a pool cleaner by day, but it's really just a front for his real job, hunting and killing vampires. When he urgently needs some cash for his family, he takes on more high-value jobs, which brings him into collision with a vampire leader plotting a takeover of Los Angeles. The story gets quite convoluted, and it doesn't make a lot of sense always. Plot points that seem important don't seem to develop into anything really, such as where the vampires are getting their sunblock factor 5,000 from so they can move around in the daytime. The Vampire Hunters Union also doesn't really do anything beyond creating a block and allowing Fox to be paired with Franco. And as for comedy, it's also not that funny, but the tone, I guess, is comedic in that it's very lightweight. But it does, I have to say, nail the action part very, very well. The action comes thick and fast, and the vampires are something different, much more martial arts meets gangbanger focused. They're also amazingly flexible, which makes for some interesting fight sequences. The action's really good, and you can tell that it's been produced by people with fight and stunt backgrounds. Fox is effortlessly cool and likable as usual. Franco is the comedic sidekick and is largely just there to take a beating and require saving often. But the plot is really just about bringing the characters into conflict and not really much else. Don't overthink it. It's an entertaining enough action film with a comedic flavour. Also, it's got Snoop Dogg as a bounty hunter, which is fine. It's worth a look, I think, if your expectations are appropriate low. I found it entertaining, but don't expect a lot out of it. But there is definitely some fun to be had here. Okay, finally today is Malignant. It's from 2021, starring Annabelle Wallis, Maddie Hassan, and George Young, and it was showing on Netflix. So Madison, played by Wallace, begins having visions of people being murdered, only to realise that the events are really happening. There's a trend with films lately to undermine their own plot by opening with a scene that explains what's going on later in the film, and I find that it eliminates any of the mystery straight out of the gate. And I really wish they'd stop doing this, because part of the fun of the stories is trying to solve the mystery, but apparently we've all got to be spoon-fed everything nowadays, proving that the studios must think we're all morons or something. And sadly, this film opens with a scene of Gabriel having brain surgery by Dr. Weaver and her colleagues to eliminate the cancer of evil and violence. Of course, this will be central to events later. After Madison is attacked by her violent and abusive husband Derek and wakes up in the hospital discovering that she's lost her unborn baby in the attack, she continues to bleed from the back of her head while having visions of a killer murdering Dr. Weaver. As the other doctors are murdered and Madison continues having visions of their deaths, links are discovered between the doctors, Gabriel and Madison. So I want to talk some spoilers here. If you don't want anything spoiled, pause it, go watch it and come back. Okay, so the central conceit of this is that Madison had a teratoma, which is basically an unabsorbed parasitic twin, and in this case they shared a brain and spinal cord. Gabriel was mostly removed in the opening sequence from Madison, but what remained woke up when her husband hit her head against the wall, and Gabriel is now taking his revenge, increasingly taking control over Madison's body. This is quite an interesting idea for a horror film, and I think it mines that sort of natural medical type horror that's out there. Although a teratoma is usually a tumour mass of cells and such like, not a fused secondary person a la Quato, and certainly not a horrible monster face peering out the back of somebody's head. But kudos for trying something a bit original. It's also interesting when Gabriel takes over and Madison's body moves around backwards, sort of jerkily and twisted, and with sort of unusual movement. The film isn't particularly scary though, but it can be a bit gory in places. People might have a hard time swallowing the twist, I think, more than anything else, despite it being telegraphed pretty loudly in the opening sequence. Overall though, I had a good time with it. I'm up for anything that adds something new and different to the genre, and James Wan provides some new gross imagery, even if it sometimes strains believability. It's worth a look though. Alright, so those are my suggestions for this week. I hope they help. Maybe they might be things that you might be interested in. As always, if you have any suggestions, feel free to leave something in the comments below. Any thoughts or input on any of these films that maybe you've seen them and you want to talk about them, feel free to leave that below also. As always, please do click on the like and subscribe. It helps me to know that you're watching and enjoying these and they're useful to you. And also on screen is my Twitter link as well. I tweet on there about things that I'm watching, so if you want to come on there and chat with me or talk about films, please feel free to tweet at me. Alright, so I hope you're all well, enjoy some films and TV, and I'll see you next week for some more reviews. Thanks for watching, bye now.